Welcome everybody to our 18th Open Clock Club, live from England, and hope you're well wherever you are. Hope you're staying safe, as they say nowadays. And as always, we've had a really kind of busy horological week. And before it skips my mind or slips my mind, don't forget that next week, here we put our clocks forward 1 hour. So we'll be moving to 1800 British summertime. So don't forget that, otherwise you'll miss us by an hour, or you'll be an hour too early, depending on what that is. And so we had a great day today because it was the Antiquarian Horological Society Southern section, lecture. And so thank you to the shout out there, that was really appreciated, and the invitation as well to our members. So it really made us feel part of that big family. So yeah, big thank you to the Antiquarian Horological Society. And as I've said many times, they're a great organization and publish a really world-class peer-reviewed journal. So AHS, thank you. We had a live stream on Thursday on our rusty tall case clock. And again, thank you for those of you that joined us there for a bit of a laugh. And we, for the past 3 weeks, we've been looking at the stuff that surrounds the clock, like the pendulum and the weights and the false plate, and sort of slowly moving towards the movement. Well, this week we had a look at the movement, and we sketched out a few of the repairs that clock's going to need, and we kicked it about a bit on looking at options and so on. So if you want to catch up with that, you can find it on our other channel, which is How to Repair Pendulum Clocks live stream. And we'll be back, all being well, on Thursday. So what else happened this week? Oh, we tried to buy a lathe and we were defeated by Brexit. So that was a bit of a downer, but anyway, we'll regroup and approach that one again, which leads me actually to the Facebook group. So as always, big thank you to all of you people who have contributed to the Facebook group, including talking about the lathe with the DRO and the variable drive, which is really cool. That was nice to learn about that. But all the contributions and all the help you've offered to our members, very much appreciated. So if you're not a member of the Facebook group, if you head over to our How to Repair Pendulum Clocks, then fantastic, we'll see you there during the week. So as always, bit of housekeeping. If this session, I'll just check it's recording. Yeah, we're recording. So it will go on our archive channel later tonight, all being well. So if you want to remain anonymous, then please keep your camera turned off. The real work is done here behind the scenes by Team Open Clock Club. So big thank you to Team Open Clock Club, who are on the live chat now, and just check that we're chatting. Yeah, we're chatting away already. So thank you for that. So please, that's really interesting for us to get that feedback. And if I can answer questions as we go along, I will. If I can't, then we'll try and answer them in the week on Facebook. And if we find something particularly fascinating, we'll probably carry it over to another week. So anyway, enough of that. As always, we'll try and fit in a comfort break at some point. And again, just lost track of what time it is. And you may remember that last week we promised that we'd try and finish this pivoting job. Now it was all good fun. If you didn't see it, then you can catch up again on the YouTube thing. And a particular warm welcome to new members, of course, and beginners in clock repair, because that's really what we're about. This repair here, the repivoting, is really, I suppose, what you call an intermediate repair. So if you are a beginner, please don't be put off by this stuff, which looks a little bit more complicated, because if you get into clockmaking, some point or other, you're going to be faced with a problem like this. So we kind of made it more difficult for ourselves by making a drill out of a bit of steel, which was partly successful. We drilled the hole, which was good. The drill didn't break off in the hole, but I've kind of got I was thinking about this during the week, and maybe I was a bit rash last week on 2 points. One was when I made the drill, if you were there to witness it, I didn't temper it after I hardened it. I just plunged it straight in cold water and used it, and it was fine. We were really, really, really lucky. But what I should have done in retrospect is to temper it back with my spirit lamp, so the tip was kind of just turning a very pale straw. Otherwise, if it had broke off in the hole, I also said, somebody said, if it breaks off in the hole, is that it for the arbor? The answer is no, but I kind of shrugged it off and said, oh, it's fine, like it was easy. It's not. If the drill breaks off in the hole, it can be a real pig to get it out, but you normally can get it out. And usually if you temper back a little bit, it doesn't break, unlike carbide, which is brilliant, the little micro drills in tungsten carbide, but they are super fragile in comparison. So the good news is that we got a hole in our arbor, and the hole was pretty concentric. The couple of bits of not so good news is that you can see in there in the hole there's a little step. So for whatever reason, our drill got a bit smaller. Now that doesn't matter because we can taper our pivot accordingly. But what was a little bit disappointing was the fact that we wanted to, so if I just offer it up if I can see it. So this was the bit of blued steel that, hold it still, that I made the drill from, and it was 0.7 millimeter in diameter, and we stoned it down a bit first, if you remember. And I hope some of you have had a chance to have a go during the week at making a drill this way, by the way. And we hoped that this drill would make a hole that was small enough, because we made it slightly smaller diameter, to fit its stock material in to make the pivot. And unfortunately, that isn't the case. When I made the point of the drill, it was obviously slightly off center, so it was drilling oversized. So if we look at our steel now, we can see that it's sloppy, and it's actually sloppy by quite a long way. So we have to abandon that idea, but nevertheless, let's not worry about that. Whoever it was that said it's not getting into the soup that's difficult, it's getting out of it, that's the problem. It was Peter Bonnet, I think, of Alex and Bonnet fame, but probably the Greeks or Shakespeare or somebody like that. So we've got other steel. So what we're going to effectively do is to put a stepped pivot in there, which is kind of quite useful actually, because what it means is if that pivot isn't completely concentric when we put it in, we've got a little bit of leeway to turn it concentric. Now, you could start with something like 1 millimeter, turn it down to 0.7 or 0.8 or whatever it is, get it in the hole. Then when it's in there, turn it concentric. But I found a bit of 0.8, so I'm going to see if we can get away with either stoning or turning that down to make our pivot from, but let's see. And then we've got a decision to make. So that decision is, do we leave it at 0.8? So that's 0.7 to 0.8. It's quite a big difference when you're down at that kind of size, and open up our pivot hole a bit. You know, nobody would know apart from us, few people. Or do we turn it back down to 0.7 and finish it that way? So there you go. There's the kind of moral maze question for tonight. But just before I start with this, John and I have been grafting away, as they say in Yorkshire, on rack striking for our second book. And we've got talking about motion work. Those of you that have done the first book, thank you very much for buying it. But we were interested in how the motion work works on those Smith-Senfield clocks. And so I was thinking about why on tall case clocks, they use 12-to-1 ratio in one step and not 3 and 4 like they do on the Smith-Senfield. And I've got a bit of an idea. So something to be thinking about while I'm messing about with this is, why did they stick with that silly little 6-leaf pinion on a tall case clock when they should have split the ratios to make it more kind of mechanically sound? Anyway. Jeremy's got a question. What's the question?
If you break the drill in the hole,
Yeah.
is it true that you can dissolve it by leaving it overnight in Coca-Cola?
You can dissolve the a steel drill or a broken off screw in a plate, in a brass watch plate or something with alum, or maybe Coca-Cola, I don't know about that. Other brands of soft drink are available. But of course, the problem with this is it's steel in steel. So whatever you dissolve, you're going to dissolve that as well. With carbide, you can get a bit of blue pivot steel and basically crush the drill up into powder, and then it kind of comes out kind of after a fashion. The problem with carbide is if you've got a tiny, tiny bit stuck in there and you try and drill with something else or drill again, it just breaks the drill off again. So that's problematic. And if you break off a steel drill, then you're faced with, you could either drill a hole through the side here, a little hole, and try and lever it out, which might work. Then you've got a hole in the side of the arbor. But if you get carbide again, you can normally sort of pick it out. It takes ages, but if you're patient, you can usually get there without having to chop the, you're not going to lose the pinion, but what you might have to do, of course, is chop the end of the arbor off, drill it out, and you've just turned one small job into a much bigger job. Yeah, I've never tried alum. If there's anybody out there. Right, so our 0.8mm just fits in to where that funny little step is there. So that's kind of quite useful. So I'm going to, I'm not sure we're going to be able to keep this in focus because it's not the best setup, but we are working on that. I'm going to try and turn. So I've got two options now. We know that 0.8 is just about going to go in the hole, and 0.7 is massively too baggy. So we know that it's kind of up at the 0.8 end. So I could try stoning it, which the beauty of stoning it is that if you did it with an oil stone, it'll give the pivot some texture, some kind of bite when we push it in the hole. Because ideally we'll do this, we won't use any solder, we won't use stud lock. We might have to use stud lock, but hopefully not. So what I'm going to do first is just, and I hope you can see this. I'll try get it in focus of sorts. Move it that way. So what I'm going to do first, you can see if I can just get it to focus. Maybe, come on. That the it's bent by the look of it. The wire is already bent. So let's just, where are my tweezers when you need them? Try that again. If the wire's bent, I'll cut the end off. It doesn't look brilliant. I'm going to cut the end off just to be sure and hope that the next bit, just check the collet. I'll just use a bit of pith wood and clean the seat of the collet. It might have something on it. This lathe has had a lot of use and quite a lot of abuse along the way, which is fine. It gets by for what I do, because I don't really deal with watches and things. Still a bit wobbly. I'm going to cut it off if I can. So I'll use carbide graver. Let's just see how this goes. And if it's not straight, I'll just use the other end of the. Oh yeah, does it work, Alan? Yeah. Successfully?
Yes, needs to be hot and doesn't touch brass.
Right. Great. So that sounds like a thumbs up for Alan. If you have a screw that's broken off in a plate or something like that in a brass plate. Still doesn't look massively concentric, does it? I'm afraid. So I might have to use the other end of the wire. This is a bit bent. Let's just. Try that. Okay, so I'm just going to, where I've just turned and broken off the end of the steel. Maybe I have to live with that, which is slightly irritating. Russian. Everything seems to have got pretty magnetic as well.
Is a clockmaker's tool a useful tool for starters?
Clockmaker's throw. By that, do you mean a sort of between centers device with a faceplate on it? If that's what you mean with 3 dogs, that's as it is actually really useful. But where it's most useful is if you've got something like a watch plate, really, and you want to bore countersink. Say you've got a watch plate and you want to borrow a countersink for the barrel to go in or something, then that's great because you can position the plate wherever you want. You can still buy those things for modern lathes, and most 8mm watchmakers lathes that come in a kit have them. And if you've just got centers, that's great. I mean, the only thing that a collet lathe gives you the advantage of course, is it's dead convenient. You can do this all between centers, which is how a lot of historic work was made. So maybe, I mean, most people start and kind of going through this process again myself of thinking about lathes and where you go. It's kind of quite interesting, really, because this little 8mm lathe is really sort of pretty much on the small side for. It's a little bit better, isn't it, for the stuff we do, but it's really useful. So an 8mm collet lathe is great. 6mm is usually much less expensive, but again, you're more restricted on size. And then when people move up, they tend to, if you've got deep pockets, get a Shaublin 102 or 70. And if your pockets aren't quite as deep and you want something incredibly flexible in Europe or in England, the Myford ML7 or whatever it's called is really the way to go. You kind of can't beat it for value for money. You can do screw cutting on it. It's got a saddle. You can put a T-rest on it. The parts are relatively inexpensive. So clockmaker's throw, I don't know. I've never used one other than something similar in a modern lathe with a sort of faceplate. The steel's just sticking out a little bit farther. I'll try and not muck about and I'll try and do it like that. So we've got a tiny, actually quite tiny bit to take off here. Let's just have a look.
Using a carbide cutter.
Yeah. Yeah, using carbide, but I could use my that to demonstrate. I'll use the trusty three-sided bit of dogwood handled thing that we made last week. So for those of you that weren't here last week, we made, can you see that? Three-sided graver type chamfer thing. And then on the other end, oh, dropped my eyeglass, made kind of rounded thing as well, sort of for turning a balance staff or something like that. And this is just steel, blued steel. So I'll try this, see if it cuts, which is probably asking for trouble. But as always, it never stopped me before. Yeah, it's interesting. The steel cuts really well, but it's just like a totally different experience to cutting with the carbide. The steel there doesn't cut as quickly. It seems to have much smaller granules of blued steel. So maybe it's better, and it's certainly easier because you don't have that problem of sharpening the carbide in the first place, which you really have to do on a
says, is a micro ML7, is it a power loom?
yeah. Right. I think we've been lucky. Sorry, that's a really very non-useful picture you've got there, but we'll just put in there. I spoke too soon. Yeah, my Ford ML7 has a motor on it, and the good thing for the kind of home workshop is with that kind of lathe is that it has a single phase motor, so you don't have to use an inverter or a rotary phase converter or something. So I'm just turning the wheel, the arbor, in relation to the pivot. It's not, you can't see a thing, I know. I'm gonna just risk it and just do a little bit more turning. Maybe I can see where it was rubbing. Let's have a look. Just do a bit more. In fact, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transfer to stoning it, because what do they say? Great is the enemy of good. Inevitably, oops, totally out of focus. Inevitably, what will happen is it'll go from being a really good fit to too slack, and then we'll have to cut it off and start again. Actually, it's not brilliant, but it's not bad for what we want here. Let's just have a look at what that looks like. Have a look at what that looks like. So have a look, get out and turn it around. Not perfect, but for sake of this demonstration, we might live with that. And remember, we're going to turn off 0.1 of a millimeter. But what we've got, of course, is we've got that tiny little kind of gap in there because the hole was stepped. So I suppose ideally, what we would do is take this out, start with bigger steel, as I said before, like 1 millimeter or 0.9 or something, turn that down so there's an actual shoulder there, so it goes right up to that shoulder, and then turn the pivot down from there, and you wouldn't have that little kind of step there, which is annoying. And it actually might, it would help, obviously, if that was touching, it would be sounder. But anyway, so what I'm going to do, in fact, what I should have done before I put it in the collet was to measure, I'll see if I can find another wheel from the clock to measure the length of the pivot, and it'll save me taking it out again. Right, so I've got the escape wheel, taking it that the pivots are all pretty much the same length. So in millimeters, so the overall pivot length is about 2 millimeters, and it starts to go into the kind of cone on the end of the pivot at about 1.8. So I'm going to try and cut it down. Remember, I've only just kind of wound it into the hole at the moment. So once it's cut down roughly, what I'm going to do is tap it in, and hopefully it'll stay in there with without any glue or anything. But I mean, if it gets to this point and it's a good fit like that, then I don't know what you people think, but I wouldn't worry too much. If it's a good fit, I wouldn't worry too much about putting some 2706 or whatever they call it, Loctite on it. It's not called that, but it's across there. Probably what would be useful here would be the thin one that kind of gets sucked in with capillary action. Or you could do, as I said last week, the old timer's trick of grinding up a little bit of oilstone dust and putting that in with the pivot, which just kind of grips it in there. And we'll soon know whether this is too slack, because as we start with our graver, it'll come out, and then we've got to make a decision whether to go down the pub or start again. So let's just have a look what that 2 millimeters looks like. You won't trust it? Yeah, you can do that. I mean, it won't come out. I mean, this is how the pivoting's been done. It's with, when you're holding the wheel and you push it onto the bit of steel, remember what radius you've got there. You've got a massive kind of mechanical advantage, they call it, over it. So if it's tight in there like this is, I mean, it's not, you know, I'm pulling on it quite hard now. I don't want it to come out. But it's not just kind of resting in there. It's actually pretty well jammed in there. But when we cut it, if it's going to come out, it'll come out, and then I'll have to eat humble pie and start again. So anyway, let's just have a look what 2 millimeters looks like. There we go. So this is where it's going to fall out, if it's going to fall out. I'm going to get my T-rest a little bit closer. Remember, we've got the, again, would be an advantage of using like a center at this end with a hole in it that you could work through, because what we've got here, we've already got quite a lot of material. You can see it deflecting, and then we've got this thin bit of steel, so it's trying to push up, and it's not maybe the most amazing fit in the whole. He says, making excuses.
So it's definitely needs chewing up.
Definitely is chewing out. Yes, I think it's going to come loose. There we are. It's come loose. Okay. There we are. So we've got, we can either abandon it now, or we can look for some bigger diameter steel and make a step on it, which is probably what I'm going to do. So let's just get our steel. I want something that's obviously reasonably close to diameter. I don't want to be turning it down like crazy if I can help it, but nevertheless. No, don't know those makes, but maybe somebody in the group will have done. Let's get a tray. Yeah, here in this country, I mean, in England, there are, I've been looking on, as we might do on the internet at Lathe. And of course, if you've got the space and you've got a good solid floor, a good concrete floor or something, then there's some amazing industrial lathes like the Smart and Brown Model L, I think it is, which is a relatively small cast iron lathe. Boxford, you know, all those really good quality brands, and they're kind of like for nothing, you know, well, in relative terms compared to the Swiss lathes anyway. But like me, I'm working from home at the moment, as you can see. It's just not practical to, yeah, John will, we always joke about moving, when I used to have a Shaolin 102 on a cast iron stand. I mean, that thing just kills you, just moving it. Just the thought of moving it gives you backache. So I don't really want to go back there. But those things are relatively inexpensive. The old adage, I think, is right, that you can, with a decent precision lathe, you can turn small stuff in a big lathe, but not the other way around. And yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. Right, okay, so I've got some 1mm material here, so I'm just going to get a collet. Oh, that's a bit better anyway, because the stock's actually straighter in the first place, which is going to help. Now, again, I want to get rid of the end of the stock. You can see here where it's been sheared off, and that bit is like really, really tough. So I don't want to start trying to turn that. I want to get rid of that. You could let it down, I suppose. In fact, you know, we're using this blued steel, which in this state is a lot harder than the kind of host material. That might not actually be helping us in particular. There's no kind of compliance, I think, in the pivot. If you're fitting this to a French clock with a hard arbor, that they would be kind of more similar materials. So it would be an idea just to let this down, and this blued steel, when it's sort of let down, annealed, still retains quite a lot of toughness. So it would still be, I think, actually stronger than the arbor. But anyway, let's persevere with this as it is. This could be a long night, as they say. Anneal. My pick wood gone. There it is. Good. So again, start again. The reason I break it off, by the way, when it's got down to something like the sort of core of it, is it breaks off easily. I mean, you obviously try and break it off without distorting the work. Is because it's that point in the middle where your graver tip breaks off, so it's easy to break the steel off than the graver tip. But that might be bad practice. I don't know whether you actually keep turning. Obviously, if it's you're working on a big lathe with a parting tool, you part the whole way through. But as you know, when you get right to the middle, if you've got a lathe, it sort of breaks off itself anyway. So that's my excuse for breaking it off rather than turning right to the middle. Lack of discipline, the usual thing. Just move the T-rest up a wee bit. Okay, so we're starting at just under 1 millimeter here, and I'm going to, as you can see by the collet size there, going to turn down to 0.8. So no idea really what that looks like other than to keep trying it in the hole. So let's move up again a little bit. If you're new to turning with a watchmaker's lathe, what's quite alarming is the fact that you often turn above center height. If you're used to, if you're an engineer and you're that kind of golden rule of you always turn on center height with the top of your lathe tool, with a watchmaker's lathe, you tend to turn above center height and with the oblique end of the tool, and it prevents the tool, which is obviously only held with your hand and not with a lump of cast iron, from diving under the work and breaking the work or breaking the tool. So that's it. That looks a bit counterintuitive if you've worked on a center lathe, on a big lathe. So I'm just going to turn a pretty coarse taper on this. To start with, and what that's going to do is that's going to indicate to us, if I can find the arbor, where the diameter is. That's how we determine what the diameter is, rather than taking it out and trying to measure it, which is next to impossible. You can see there it's already starting to go in the hole. But the problem, as we've got there, is we've got that little step. So I suppose what I could do, but it would drag it on forever, is to go back and drill it out a little bit bigger with a more parallel sided hole. But anyway, we've always got the Loctite to fall back on if everything else fails. I'm afraid it's the rather dull process of just turning a bit off and trying it, turning a bit off and trying it. Good. You can see why the tip over tool rest is so useful when you're doing this kind of work, where you've got to take it out and try it again. If you've got the fixed tool rest, is fine, T-rest, but the tip over is really useful because you don't have to keep moving it out of the way every time. Can also maybe see actually get in focus. That on the tool, what I've done is I've just chamfered there. You can just about see it catching the light, the end. So when I do turn up to the shoulder, it's not cutting into the shoulder. It kind of butts up against the shoulder. Right. So again, it's wobbly, but the wheel is sticking on there quite well. So we know that we're approaching the ballpark, maybe it says. So I'm just trying to tilt the graver to make it more and more parallel without making this end too small diameter. Yeah. So any thoughts on the motion work issue? Why do long case clocks have 12-to-1 motion work? Anybody on the live chat, Rachel? That, yeah, John and I were talking in the week about the gearing between the hour hand and the minute hand on a clock. Is normally 12-to-1 ratio, and in the Smith Enfield they do that in 2 steps. So they do 1 3-to-1 ratio, and then they do 1 4-to-1 ratio, which makes a whole lot of sense, a bit like a turret clock. But on old long case clocks, they don't. They just do it. They do it in 1 step, not 2 steps. Sorry, in 1 12-to-1, which means you've got a 6-leaf pinion and 72. Is it 6 times 12? You know how good my mental maths is. It seems a bit crazy, but I think I kind of understand why they do it like that. Trying it. So it was really exciting on the live stream, the fact that we've got ourselves a whole lot of challenging. Right. So that's good because it's a really good tight fit so far, but it's not going up to that shoulder. And of course, what I don't know really, I suppose I could measure it with a bit of wire, is how deep the hole is. So I might actually make it make the pivot this bit a bit shorter. Touching the collet, which is not that good.
Please answer the question.
What was the question?
The wrong question. Why do Lathe clocks have one motion?
All right, nobody participating. Well, I don't know is the answer. But I think it's Derek says answer the question. I think it's because if you have a 6 leaf pinion driving 72 hour wheel, which is the easiest way to do it, it means that the hour wheel is relatively large diameter compared to if you split the ratio, and therefore any slop in between, because you've got to have shake between the leaf of the pinion and the two teeth, the wheel teeth, is at a larger radius. Therefore, it looks less on the dial. The smaller the hour wheel, the more any given amount of shake would show up as shake on the dial. So I think that's my answer. But maybe they just had one way of doing it and they stuck to it and never changed. Who knows? Anyway, that's my theory. I'm going to base the rest of my clockmaking career on it. Using the term clockmaking career laughably. Right, come on. Can't even see me. Right, so I've got the arbor pretty parallel, but it's still not going past that first step, which is maybe the answer would have been to drill it out larger diameter. Or maybe I think it was Mark who said 2 weeks ago, why did you just use a drill rather than showing off and making one? Because why make life easy when it can be difficult? So we're kind of getting there. I mean, normally I suppose I could put some blue on it. Maybe that would be an idea. Sometimes you can see a little witness mark where you push the arbor on, but in this case, I think the pivot is such a lot harder than the arbor. It's the arbor that's kind of probably inside the hole. It's probably getting all squidgy and mangled up in there, which is not a good idea. The glue is looking more and more and more favorable every second. It looks like I'm committed to this. Please, I take a comfort break at your own interest. It was interesting listening to James Nye's lecture this afternoon because he, I was sort of like doing 2 things at once, but he said the work person was at the vice, like they were chained to the vice, which of course we are. Right, it's about halfway in the hole now. So what I'm going to actually do, because it's looking quite firm in there, is I'm going to just take it down a little bit more. You can see, in fact, on the arbor, can't you, on the pivot, where it's how far it's gone in. It's actually just gone in about 1/3 of the way. Looks terribly rough under there, doesn't it? It looks amazingly smooth to the naked eye. Just shows. Just stick to the 18-inch rule. Any more nice distracting questions?
because if it's a bit rough, it should grip better in the hole.
Ah, that's a good point, actually. That's a really good point, Derek. If it's got some kind of texture to it, which it has, you can see it's kind of about, well, a bit further on now. So how are we doing for time? Oh my gosh, doesn't time fly when you're having fun? Sorry, probably shouldn't say this, but far more exciting than clock repairing. Of course, it's the everybody's eyes are going to roll. Beginning of the Grand Prix season tomorrow, so that's good news. I've got something to look forward to. Just have a look where we need some more material off. Right, okay, yeah, it would be, yeah, I don't know, I mean, people do seem to have got it in a bit for Mercedes, just because they've been so amazing. That's a funny thing though, isn't it? Of course, if you're so good for so long, then people like the underdog a bit more. But I think it would be lovely, not that I know anything about it, I'm not actually an avid watcher of Formula One, but it's nice to see Honda, if that happens with the engine. That would be great in their last season. Right. No idea whether we're actually getting anywhere with this, but as you can see, that mark is now at least halfway along. So we'll just take a little bit more off there. Oh, nice. Nice. So does he get trackside tickets then, Chris? No, oh, a shame.
Says because of you, they've got to watch qualifying on catch up.
Right, okay. Oh, because this now, or is it qualifying now? I shouldn't really start talking about Formula One, should I?
No. I'm
sure there are other... All right, okay. Talking about Formula One, half the audience has gone to sleep now, so we should stop talking about that. Right, we're getting there. So as you can see, it's nearly on and it's pretty concentric as well, but it hasn't quite gone up to that shoulder. Now I'm not going to muck about with that because I know that that is okay for diameter. I'm going to tap that in, then I'm going to turn down so we see that shoulder. So we'll go back to square one. We're obviously going to run out of time. So again, my usual apologies for that, but I will get this done now. So how are we doing? We've got 5 more minutes. So I'm going to continue with this. If you want to keep with us for a bit, if you have to go, then fully understand, and we will see you next week, by which time we'll have moved on to the rogue tooth, if you remember the rogue tooth. So you can see that the problem here is that the hole isn't particularly straight, obviously, but that doesn't matter because we're going to turn it down now once it's tapped in. So I'll be employing my brass hammer in a bit. So I'm going to cut it off again like we did last time, and then hope to a degree that that taps in, but it's a much firmer fit in the hole than it was last time.
Derek says the pivot looks a bit long.
The pivot looks a bit long. Yeah, well, there's that whole thing, isn't there? One of our other live stream clocks, I was, believe it or not, they were on the kitchen side, as you do. And I was explaining to Team Open Clock Club, gosh, look at those pivots, they look so long. They're sticking right out, as they have done for 250 years from the edge of the plate. There is no wrong or right length, Derek. So I think I might go with this and try and set a new trend for super long pivots. Rogue tooth. Yeah, the rogue tooth is when we did the refacing of the pallets a couple of weeks ago now, was it? We got the new face on the pallets, everything was soldered on, all really lovely. And what happened was the escapement started ticking, but there was so little external drop, was it? Can't remember now. That on one or two teeth, the escapement was hanging up, which is a brilliant situation to be in because it tells you that you're right nearly there. So what we're going to do next week, so I'm going to press on with this for a bit now and get it finished in the week or whatever, is that we are going to try and identify why the escapement runs for like 3/4 of the wheel and not the whole thing. So I'm just going to mark this at about, so that shoulder is about 1/3 of a mil. So I'm going to mark it about, the mark's about 2.4, and hopefully this time it stays in the hole. If it doesn't, then I'm going to weep. What we definitely need is the little brass hammer, even though the pivot is 6 inches long. Yeah, we were talking about this a bit in the live stream, that thing where you sorry, lathe bearings, where you have a pivot that's a bit shorter than the plate. And I've heard again, other places, people say, no, that's no good because it'll kind of work its way inside the plate and all hell will break loose. In my experience, that doesn't happen. But obviously, if you're making something new, then you want the pivot and the plate thickness to be about the same. No, it's still working its way out. Ah, well. But try. No. Oh dear, 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 dear. So I think the the moral of the story then, so we're about running out of time anyway, so that's perfect timing. So maybe Mark was right. We should have just used a drill off the peg and drilled a good deep hole with carbide. In fact, you don't even need carbide with these arbors. You just drill a hole with a twist drill, find your center as we did, drill a good deep parallel hole, a bit of paraffin or something on there as a lubricant, and then you haven't got this problem of that stepped hole, which means that our pivot has got to be tapered and probably not quite deep enough and comes out the hole. So hopefully we learn through these partial failures. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Mark's advice and I'm going to the pivot was actually quite a good fit in there, but it was not going to be successful. I'm going to drill this deeper and parallel with a slightly bigger drill. And then I will get to the point by next week where we can just literally finish the work and it's done, just to prove it can be done. So thank you for bearing with us on that. Hopefully not too dull an hour. And so I won't drag this on anymore. I'll get it done for next week, just all but the very, very last stages of finishing to diameter and stoning it, polishing it up and things, and then we'll get back onto the rogue tooth. So as always, massive thank you to Team Open Clock Club, and hopefully see you during the week on Facebook, where everybody chips in to help, and you know who you are, who've helped, and we really appreciate it. And if not, we'll see you on Thursday for Rusty Clock live stream as well. So thanks very much. Have a great week and see you again. Bye.